All right, boys and girls, we are back on another edition of the Big Ben Show. I'm your host, Ben Domenech, coming to you from the capital, Washington, D.C. And today I want to talk to you about some issues that are really important to me, important to families across the country, and particularly important to high school girls and girls who are in sports across the country who have been facing incredible challenges in recent years, challenges that seem to only have escalated over the course of the past couple of months, even in the wake of Donald Trump's executive order on these issues. Cut 4.
What would make this fair for her to compete, for those who are competing against her? What would that kind of structure in competition look like?
Who is her?
AB.
Okay, AB Hernandez is a male who identifies as a female. What would be fair is to have Hernandez competing in the male category. It is not fair to the females competing to have to compete with a male.
In California, Washington, Oregon, Maine, and soon in Minnesota, we are seeing individuals who are men, biological men, playing against women, young women, in sports of all manners, mostly track and field, championships that should be competed for by the girls who have been working for so long, putting so much effort, resources, time into a sport that they love, and now have scholarships hanging in the balance. And yet those things are being stolen away from them by selfish men who decide that they want to cut in line. Cut 2.
Second place, Lauren Matthews. And first place, your 2025 winner, in a time of 55.70 from East Valley of Spokane, Veronica Garcia.
You can guess what scenes like that look like, and you're going to see more of them across the country unless things dramatically change. The A.B. Hernandez, who was referenced in that CNN clip, won the high jump, the triple jump, second in the long jump, and Garcia won that 400-meter race by almost a full second. You hear them cheering for the girl who came in second because you know what she was denied. And it's impossible to deny it when you observe them. They are obviously male. And what we see happening again and again is people unwilling to stand up and just say the honest truth, which is that when they are competing against these girls, they are bullying them. They are taking them on in ways that are completely unfair, that dash their hopes and dreams of being able to have the success in a field that they have dedicated their lives and their resources and their time to, along with their families. And yet their attitude, the attitude of these athletes, is totally dismissive. Cut 8.
I disagree. Trans women competing in women's sports does not threaten women's sports as a whole, because trans women are a very small minority of all athletes, and the NCAA rules regarding trans women competing in women's sports have been around for 10 plus years. And we haven't seen any massive wave of trans women dominating.
I'm still a child, you're an adult, and for you to act like a child shows how you are as a person.
That's Leah Thomas and A.B. Hernandez commenting on these questions. Basically, what we're seeing play out in front of us is something that the left does time and time again. They pretend that something isn't happening, and they say that, you are being crazy to bring it up, you're crazy to talk about it, you're crazy to point it out, and yet at the same time, they think that it's a good thing that it's happening if they're exposed with the truth. Cut 10.
My actual claim here is that transgenderism is false and we should eradicate it from public life because it's harmful to everyone.
Actually,
if you want to talk about the claim, we're
let's
actually
start with that then.
Yeah.
What does transgenderism in public look like to you?
It's allowing men to be treated for the purposes of the law as women. It's men taking 900 sports trophies from women in recent years.
And they didn't take 900.
They took 900. There's a report just came out from the United Nations, actually. 890 trophies and medals across 600 women who were competitors, across 29 different sports and 400 competitions. That came out like yesterday.
And they deserved them.
It didn't happen, and they deserve them. Okay, that is the logic I hear from the pro-trans crowd. Yeah.
There's a reason that polling, independent, bipartisan polling, has shown consistently opposition to men playing in girls' sports. The unfairness is evident. It's right in front of our eyes. In fact, a recent poll in California found that over 70% of of schools' children's parents are opposed to having biological men, play and compete in girls' sports. And the reason is because what they're doing is bullying. They are the bully in this situation. They are entering these spaces that they do not belong, and they are forcing you to either agree with a lie, go along with a lie, or to confront them on it. And that confrontation is something that most people want to avoid out of a lean toward politeness, a lean toward the idea that they do not want to have to be arguing this place in something that should be enjoyable, fun, a learning experience for all of these young women. And yet what we see is a Democratic Party that is willing to acknowledge that this is hurting them, willing to acknowledge that this is unfair, but will not do anything, not raise a finger to actually change things. Cut 5.
So like you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports,
right.
that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out say no.
No, and I appreciate
But like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that.
It is easy for Gavin Newsom to call out, maybe, but not easy for him to do anything about it. And certainly it seems like he's unwilling to do anything about it. We've had the threats from the Trump administration of going after federal funding for California, of other things that they could potentially do. We've had this executive order, but Congress needs to act on these points. There needs to be more actions in states on these points, because across the country right now, I think we are underestimating the possibility that the left isn't going to back off of this issue, that they're not going to actually change their minds, but instead they're just going to wait. They're going to acknowledge that they tried to push this a little too early, and when they get back in charge again in Washington and in states across the country, they are going to make it mandatory to allow these men to compete against our girls. It's unacceptable. Lionel Shriver wrote, "We seem to be entering an era in which everything about ourselves that we don't like is subject to revision." Well, you can't revise the way that you were born, the way that God made you. And that's something we shouldn't want to revise either. And we certainly shouldn't be bullying people who won't go along when we play pretend. I'm Ben Domenech. You can follow me on Twitter at bdomenech. Subscribe to The Big Ben Show. Like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And you can email us at bigben@fox.com. Happy to be joined today on The Big Ben Show by Jennifer Sey, founder of the startup sportswear brand XX-XY Athletics, former U.S. national champion gymnast and longtime Levi's executive. Be sure to check out her book, Levi's Unbuttoned: The Woke Mob Took My Job But Gave Me My Voice. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I wanted to have you on to talk about this spree of events that we saw happen over the past couple of weeks that brought to a head once again the issue of biological men in girls' sports. And we saw this happen in a lot of different instances and places that led to viral videos and the like that I know that you're aware of. When you see this playing out, what's your initial reaction? And do you think that it demonstrates that this is a problem that still needs more action in order to be solved?
Definitely needs more action. It seems to be accelerating since February, when President Trump signed the executive order to protect women's sports. In fact, this year alone, including this past weekend, there have been close to 100 instances of boys meddling in girls' track and field events. On track and field alone, close to 100 instances at the high school level. And as you pointed out, in 5 blue states this past weekend, boys won medals in girls' state championship meets. That doesn't even include the Minnesota softball championship, which is coming up. I think tomorrow. It was canceled yesterday for rain, so it's coming. A boy is the pitcher for the number 1 ranked team, and he just pitched a shutout, 14 innings, 2 games. He's 6'1", so definitely towering over the other girls. It is accelerating. I mean, the Democrats are doubling down, and even the ones. This is what's frustrating to me. Ben, even the ones who pretend and give lip service to the idea that this isn't fair do nothing when it comes down to it in terms of taking action. And, everybody knows about Gavin Newsom at this point and him talking about how it wasn't fair. And yet this happened in California. But Congressman Seth Moulton, same thing. He was just on Bill Maher over the weekend talking about how wrong this is, how unfair. And yet when a vote came up in the House, guess what? He voted against protecting girls' sports and keeping girls and women's sports for women only. They're afraid of the backlash. They're afraid of the very loud and bullying minority, and they do nothing. It's cowardice.
The thing that's interesting to me is that you have this odd thing happening here where they clearly are aware that this is a problem for them politically. And so they have, as you said, they've started talking about it differently than they were in the past. But they actually are not willing to put any of their actions in line with their new spiel about recognizing that this is fundamentally unfair, as Gavin Newsom did, talking about it as being, a culture war issue that they don't want to be fighting on. And yet they seem to be completely unwilling to take any steps. What do you ascribe that to? And is it just that they are themselves being bullied by this loud minority?
They are being bullied, but they're leaders and they should have more courage than that. And they should stand up to this bullying minority. It's a small minority. The vast majority of adults, voting age adults, 80% of us across states, want to protect women's sports. And we believe women's sports should be for women only, which is, this radical, crazy idea. And yet they allow themselves, they're trying to thread this needle and pretend that they're standing up for women and girls and yet not sort of anger this bullying activist class. And it really is time for moral courage. And if you ask me what I think is going to be the difference maker, it is not going to be politicians. It is going to be the athletes themselves. There is going to be at some point an army of young women who stand up and just say no more. We're not quite there yet, but it's building. And you saw 2 young women who actually refused to stand atop the podium with a boy. And they were ushered off of the field. So girls are being told repeatedly, sit down, shut up, be quiet, take the unfairness. I mean, that's what we mean when we say girls are being erased. They are being told they cannot even stand up in their own defense. But there's going to be too many of them to ignore at some point. So I think that the young girls and the athletes are going to be the ones that change this. Talk
to me a little bit about what you hear from those athletes about the experience of going through this, particularly if you've talked to them about situations where it's, someone who has devoted years and years of their life to a sport, who loves it, who has invested time and resources and effort, who has traveled, who has gotten up early, who has done all the things that you need to excel, only to have somebody come in at the last minute, suddenly say overnight that they're a girl, and end the competitive nature really of what those young women were able to achieve.
Yeah, I try to reach out to each and every one of them because I'm just astonished by their courage, frankly, and the fact that we're putting this on young girls, 16, 17-year-old girls. Look, I trained as a young athlete. I was training 6, 7, 8 hours a day by the time I was 12 years old to be on the national team. These girls are elite high school athletes, often, in the running for Division I scholarships. They're training 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. What we often talk about is the fact that we all get really good at losing. You don't win all the time. That's part of the beauty of sports, right? Is you learn resilience. You pick yourself up, you keep trying. We can all accept losing. We learn that as athletes. We cannot accept losing when it's not a fair fight. We wouldn't accept performance-enhancing drugs. We wouldn't accept one athlete. The governing bodies wouldn't accept one athlete taking performance-enhancing drugs. And yet, they say, oh, it's just one. Well, it's not just one, as we've seen from this past weekend, Ben. But even if it was, one is too many. Girls should not have to lose to boys. And it really is just the ultimate misogyny. I can't think of any other way to describe it because we're prioritizing boys' feelings over girls' rights.
Yeah, and
how else would you describe it?
I mean, well, the other thing that I think is so odd about this in terms of the recognition that this is an issue that's hurting the left, a recognition that this is an issue that's hurting their efforts, particularly when it comes to reaching the kind of minority voters who they've been losing steadily over the past several cycles. One thing that really sticks out to me is the way that the media continues to take the side of these boys' feelings as opposed to taking the side of these young women who've worked so hard to get there. Why do you think it is that the media en masse, it seems like, seems to be unwilling to address the very real ramifications of this? They either engage in denialism, or they basically go after you for pointing it out.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was the same during COVID. Mm-hmm. They spewed the same talking points, the same sort of party issue, government issue talking points. It was the same with Biden when we could all see with our own eyes that he was failing. It's the same playbook. And what I don't understand is why they aren't reassessing at this point, because they continue to lose voters. I'm sure you saw they've announced, a big research project into why they're losing men. Mm-hmm. I don't really think they need to do the research. I think it's pretty obvious. You've been telling men for 20, 30 years that they are toxic just for being who they are. Why would you vote for a party that said that about you? But they don't seem to learn their lesson. I don't know what it will take, but I will tell you, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but I was a longtime Democrat over 30 years, and COVID is what drove me from the party. And I think it's important we understand their mindset, the voters who continue to vote. And one of the things I find as I find myself in more conservative circles is we don't totally understand their mindset. And what these voters believe is that they are the good people. It's not more complicated than that. And even if they maybe lied or fudged the truth or kind of fell for lies a few times, in their hearts, they are the good ones and the right are the bad ones. And so they're going to continue to vote for the good ones. I believe it's that simple. And I don't know what will make them realize that isn't true, that they are the censors, that they are the bullies, that they are the liars. But at some point, they're going to have to reckon with this. We're going to need a reckoning.
Well, I'll tell you, you are not alone, because virtually every Democrat friend of mine who has moved to the right in recent years is animated by both of these issues, by both the COVID era policies and the embrace of this trans identity, particularly in the context of young people and young women. If for the fathers who I know who fall into that category, it has been a radicalizing event in a real way to see this play out. And so let me ask you about the tangible things that can happen now. I know that there was a letter sent from the Trump administration to California on this point. I know that there's been talk of going after federal funding if there are not policy changes. I know you said that this is going to take more than just the politician side of things, and I completely agree with you. But for the political side, what would you like to see this administration doing? And for the many states across the country that have considerable leadership that shares your viewpoint on this, what should they be doing at this juncture?
Yeah, I mean, we need legislation. We have the executive order. That's not working. Mm-hmm. Clearly, we're seeing it accelerate since then. I mean, that should function as legislation, but we know that's not long-term legislation. So we need legislation passed in the House. I think we need legislation passed at the state level in every instance. But I'm a firm believer, and it's why I started this brand, that politics and legislation is downstream from culture. And we've been losing this on the cultural side for a very long time. We were asleep at the wheel. We allowed this other side, the ideologues, to smuggle all their crazy language into the culture. And I think out of politeness, many people went along. Mm-hmm. And once you say trans women are women, this is a girl, how can you ban this person from girls' sports? You've already acknowledged, you've conceded they're girls. And so I never use their pronouns at this point. It's always he, because they are male. Yeah. And we need to wrest back the culture with the full force. I was very involved in outing abuse in gymnastics. I was actually the first person to talk about it back in 2008. And it took 10 years from when I talked about it and got absolutely vilified by my teammates. It took 10 years for the culture to kind of catch up, and it took the arrest of Larry Nassar. And I will tell you, Ben, it still hasn't changed. There's been legislation passed called the Safe Sport Act, and they are 4 years behind on reports of abuse. And so legislation is necessary, but not sufficient. And the culture has to change to make this unacceptable. And I fear I know that is a long battle. And at this point, not a single currently competing Olympic level or professional female athlete has spoken out. That's how far we have to go.
Can I ask about, just to circle back to the media point again, what's your perspective on how ESPN has dealt with this issue or not dealt with it? Why is this? They're willing to engage in so many other hot button debates when it comes to race and when it comes to gender and things like that. But it seems to me that they've just let the Kate Fagans of the world and others just get away with saying a lot of things that minimize this problem or pretend that it doesn't exist.
I mean, it seems to me, and I don't watch ESPN, but it seems to me they're just totally woke. And they're spewing the same sort of nonsense that CNN is spewing. I mean, I'm sure you saw the interview this past week with my friend Julie Hamill, who was amazing. I can't remember the name of the anchor, Brianna something.
Kyler, yes.
Yeah, who just spewed every I won't curse, every insane talking point that the trans activists have put inside her head. I don't know how this passes for journalism at this point. They literally spew talking points from press releases without any investigation at all into whether or not this makes sense, without any thought. They just say it. And we just have to challenge it, just like my friend Julie Hamill did at every turn. We cannot use their language. We cannot concede not 1 inch, not 1 inch. I will not make a concession. People ask me all the time, should we create a third category? No, absolutely not. And here's why we should not create a third category. It furthers the idea that there actually is more than one sex. There isn't.
Well, I have seen your XXXY gear pop up all over the place. It's kind of it's interesting to me because sometimes there are things that stay within a certain lane of politics, or you think of that as being something that is not necessarily something that has a broader awareness, but clearly that has been part of increasing broader awareness. But also it represents something when people are wearing it. When you see, do people just send you pictures all the time of running across folks and at sporting events who are rocking it out?
It's showing up more and more. The last week has really accelerated things. I think with all of the instances, it's showing up at school board meetings, at rallies, outside of the CIF California State Championships, girls on the podium who are protesting or wearing it. It's like, it is accelerating. And I think it really has become, the logo in particular, sort of a uniform of common sense that you believe in biological reality. And in fact, I was speaking with a friend of mine, Jamie Reed, who is a whistleblower about gender affirming care. And she told me she was speaking somewhere recently and she was quite nervous. And she looked into the crowd and she saw people with our T-shirts on. And she knew that there were friends there that would be supportive, which was really, that moved me. Because she said, you're helping us find our people.
In terms of youth sports, it's something that I'm very aware of in terms of importance, not just because I played. I was not the most athletic one in my family. My brother and sister were both NCAA athletes. And they were both, scholarship level, swimmers and were people who, competed in all of these races where you have to get up at the break of dawn and you smell the chlorine on yourself for the rest of the day, and that as a sibling who had to cheer them on, that was something that I certainly came to understand how important it was to them. Do you think that this is a situation where the people who have been cowardly on this issue, even as they acknowledge that it's hurting them politically, do you think that they are underestimating the backlash that will continue if they don't themselves stand up and denounce this and make changes, or at least take steps that would say, we aren't going to let this be the thing that brings us down as a coalition, because I think politically it's very real in terms of the impact that it's having. I just don't understand why they have continued to go down the same road, doubling down on so many of the same things, and not standing up to it. It seems, it's crazy. I mean, the closest thing that is related to it is their unwillingness to stand up on the Free Palestine issue and stuff like that. It's like they're so scared of their left flank. Yet that is not the majority at all. I mean, the latest polling that we have from, California, even, it's more than 70% of school parents, are completely opposed to this. I would look at that as a political consultant, forget the principles of the thing and just say, we can't keep doubling down. And yet they do.
They do. I mean, they've let the wokesters take over the party. They've let these, sort of young staffers bully them into submission. I can't help but think that the kind of older members of the party don't actually believe this. But they've all convinced themselves that this is the civil rights issue of our time and they are on the right side of history. They believe that. I honestly believe they think that. And it really is they're sort of heroes in their own mind. And they're not about to admit they were wrong. Look, they still haven't admitted they were wrong about COVID. Mm-hmm. They still haven't admitted they were wrong about Biden. They're pretending that, the two authors of Original Sin are traitors to the party. I don't even want to talk about how crazy that is. They were part of the cover up and now they're whatever. No. But they just aren't. I mean, politicians in general, I don't really think that's sort of unique to the left. They're not super big on admitting when they're wrong. But at some point, they are stacking up so many issues that they are wrong on. There is no way forward but to reckon with what you've done wrong. And they're just nowhere near doing that at this point. They just aren't. So they're going to continue to lose until they can actually take some real action here.
In terms of the reaction that you get, especially from other former NCAA athletes, people who competed in the past but are now, their career as an athlete's over, are there people who who would like to come forward but are basically hamstrung or admit to you that, privately, that they can't say publicly what they really believe?
Yes, I know for a fact. I've talked to some I just know through the grapevine and, other Olympic level athletes that I know. There are many. Some are religious, some are closeted conservatives, some are just lefties with common sense, because there is a contingent on the left. I mean, the whole turf community, which we're really first on this issue, and I'd put Martina Navratilova in that group, and of course J.K. Rowling. There are many very high level athletes. I mean, we know Serena Williams said it 10 years ago, but she wouldn't dare say it now. Mm-hmm. They know they don't want to be called names. They don't want to lose lucrative sponsorships. Here's the thing that is frustrating. I know for a fact there's an Olympic gymnast, former, very famous, who also agrees with us. I'm not going to out people when they're not ready to be outed. I think that's too mean. The thing that's annoying to me is when there is enough critical mass. I don't know what that is. When 30% of the people are speaking out about it, they're going to join and they're going to pretend like they've been leaders on this subject when they've just been nothing but cowards. That said, I will welcome them to the fight because if they can make the difference, but it's annoying to me because they want all the praise, but they take none of the risk.
I completely agree with your prediction. You mentioned the corporate side of this. How much is that continuing to play a role in preventing these athletes from being public about their athletes or former athletes being public about their opinions on this? Because one of the big things that people seem to have had the attitude about, which I think was far too eager after the most recent election, was, well, now corporate America is going to take the lesson from this. They're going to understand that they can't engage in these culture wars without losing, people that, the Bud Light lesson was going to be something that made, all these different corporations reassess what they were doing. Personally, I think that was far too optimistic on the part of a lot of conservative culture warriors. What do you think about that?
I could not agree with you more. I will tell you a brief story about something that they're just doing it under the covers. They're just doing it in secret. They're calling it something else. I was invited to speak at this very mainstream business conference that I had spoken at when I was the CMO at Levi's. I was surprised they reached out to me. It's like 800 HR professionals from some of the top Fortune 500 companies. And I said to the guys who invited me, are you sure? Like, do you know... Do you know my story? And they were like, yes.
Have you Googled me recently?
Yeah. Like before, like post 2018. And I said, I'm happy to do it. I'm really happy to have contentious conversations. I'm very confident in my ability to defend my point of view. I will be diplomatic and nice, but I will very, clearly state my perspective on all sorts of things. They invited me. They said, yes, we need to do this. Then as soon as they sort of made public that I was invited, their members complained and they uninvited me. These are HR professionals from 800 of the top, Fortune 1000 companies in the country. They can't even be in a room with me. I'm too horrible. So do you really think they are going to engage diversity of opinion in their own companies if I'm too awful to even be in a room with? They have changed nothing. They're just pretending. They're pretending, and they're just doing the same thing underneath the covers. And the court. It is the most astonishing thing to me that these ideologies have been embedded in corporate America, and there is recognition, and that's why I started this brand, that brands further ideas and get them into the culture almost more than movies and music do, because we all experience brands. And until we take that back, but they all, these corporate executives, they want to be seen as social justice warriors. They want to be seen as good people, and as capitalists and people who are very, very rich for the most part. If you're in the C-suite, they're bad people now. Greed is not good. They're rich and therefore privileged and bad. But this is like a way to conceal that. And what I can't believe is people fall for it.
Yeah, I think that it's that warm blanket of allyship that's designed to prevent, anybody from paying attention to the way that they make their money or the things that they do elsewhere. But go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but I think in terms of the influence of corporate America, if Nike, which I know they're struggling right now, but is the largest company in sports, it's bigger than the NFL, it's bigger than the NBA. If they took a stand, which they're so far from doing, this would be over in an instant. Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's how influential they are.
I think that's the thing that is, an item that requires the type of cultural movement that you're talking about, because it's not going to be politics that makes them do that. It's going to be something more in terms of the demands that they hear. Let's go out on this, Jennifer. I personally, and I don't mean to sound, negative for our listeners, but personally, I think that they are dramatically underrating the possibility that this is an issue that they are going to continue to lose on, because I think that it's one where at this point, the people are with you, the parents are with you, the scenes that we see are ridiculous, and yet you don't see the kind of movement that you would expect to happen in that circumstance. Instead, I feel like the left has basically taken the lesson, and when I say the left, I mean particularly the culture war left, the woke left, not just the Bernie Sanders of the world or something like that. They have taken the lesson from this that, we tried to push this a little too early. We just need to wait it out a little bit. And then when we're back in control, we're going to go right back to doing the same things that we were doing before. In fact, we might use the power to force states to make this mandatory, that they include men in girls' sports. And that's something that I think people are dramatically underrating as a threat. Do you think that I'm right, or should I be more optimistic?
No, You think the left is dramatically underestimating this as a threat? Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. I think you're correct. I think this one lights people on fire. It's not just the issue of men in women's sports. It's an issue of fundamental truth. And if you can get us to further the lie that there is no difference between the sexes, this most fundamental thing, and that boys can become girls overnight if they just say they are, what can't we be made to believe and say? And that that lights me on fire. Like, I can never vote for a Democrat again. COVID and then this. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you, but I think they're lulled into this false sense of security because so few people actually speak out because of the backlash, but they will do it at the ballot box.
Yeah.
Where it's anonymous.
We'll see which direction things go, but I think, this is a moment when people who believe in keeping girls' sports for girls, they need to be leaning into this moment and getting as much as they can in order to protect and defend in the future when the left inevitably feels like they can have another opportunity to make it happen again from the top. I really do believe that that's a concern. Jennifer.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me today. You can check out her book, Levi's Unbuttoned, The Woke Mob Took My Job But Gave Me My Voice. You can also find her Substack at jennifersey.substack.com and follow her on X at Jennifer Sey, S-E-Y. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for having me.
Happy to be joined for the first time on this show by Griff Jenkins. Thanks so much for taking the time to sit down with me, Griff, here in D.C.
This is awesome. The Big Ben Show. I love it. There's a cigar box here, which I've been marveling about. Ben, I've been here for a quarter of a century at Fox. They never give me a cigar box. This is really cool. And full disclosure to our listeners, Ben and I'm admiring the Washington Redskins helmet in his studio as well, because we went and got our hearts broken in that playoff game. But a new season, a new receiver on the roster.
The lines. We could spend a whole segment talking about, the situation, them deciding to double down on offensive tackles after getting a guy like Jaden is just, I love it. That makes me happy. It's what you want to do when you want to protect some talent like that.
Our future for the Washington Commanders is so bright right now. We actually don't need anything from the big beautiful bill. If they were offering, if Speaker Johnson or John Thune were saying, listen, I know you guys really are having a good season, but what can we give you in the big beautiful bill? I would say, we're good, man. We're good. We don't need anything.
We're actually good. And let's talk about that bill. So obviously this is the conversation in Washington this week is all around that. And it's one of these things where, we anticipate that there's going to be a bunch of changes made on the Senate side. John Thune has reached out to the White House very early. It's the opposite of the Speaker Johnson approach, where he brought in Trump as kind of his closer. What do you think about the approach that Thune has at this point, and how much, in terms of the challenges that he faces, do you think are real stumbling blocks in terms of the opposition that he's got from some fiscal hawks, Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, et cetera? Or is this something where he can use the power of Trump and his own sort of unique new approach compared to Mitch McConnell to get through those?
I think Thune is a really smart guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think you're spot on that I think he's going to use his Trump card, if you will. Yeah. Let's call it that. Yeah. But I also think that we often have to view things from a Washington perspective, being trapped in this swamp that we call D.C., and then how the rest of the country sees it. And we always take them to the 11th hour at midnight. And with Speaker Johnson's recent track record, he's like the Washington Commanders, man. He's kicking ass. And it's delivering. But I do think that there's a little bit of a need for Thune to really lean into, and maybe I'm biased insofar as I cover so much immigration issues, and I know we'll talk here maybe a little bit about what ICE is doing and everything going on, but I do think that Thune should take a hint from yesterday. You saw Deputy White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller just go all in on Twitter and social media about why the BBB is critical and why it's got to pass. And in a nutshell, he says that this is the chance. It's now or never to get through reconciliation, meaning you don't need 60 votes, you only need 51, to get the most significant congressional legislation on immigration enforcement than we've had in decades, and he's right about that. And I think Thune needs to lean into that.
It's an interesting pivot because that was less emphasized on the House side. It was mostly about talking about the tax side of things, talking about some of the, we're going to have the largest tax increase ever if we don't extend these, et cetera, using those types of leverages, and obviously caving to a lot of the demands of the SALT Republicans and that type of thing to get it over the line. With Thune, it seems like the White House is saying, we're going to pivot to talking about the fact that if this bill is passed, Trump will not have to go back and ask for more money in terms of the infrastructure and building of the wall and everything related to that. Is that what you think is going to be kind of their closer?
I think so, Ben, because that, again, we are seeing the Democrats continue to double down. It defies logic why they continue to double down. First it was Abrego Garcia. Now we've got this horrific attack out in Colorado that I was covering all weekend. And, the American people are continuing to show in a 70 or 80 to 10 or 20, such a overwhelming majority of Americans saying, you know what, we want these criminals out of here. It's all time. The protesters are out there trying to disrupt ICE operations. And I don't think the American people are with those protesters. And I think that's the opportunity right now to point out what they did on the House side, which is this is it. And early on in any presidential administration, which you full well know, you got to act fast. With Obama, it was going to be healthcare, which actually didn't go so well.
Yeah.
But, you try and do one big thing. That's the big thing, I think, that Americans can see in addition to the tax cuts.
So you had the criticism from Elon Musk that obviously got a lot of attention from folks, him going after the bill. I personally don't think that actually matters that much because people understand on the Republican side that there's a long timeline between now and when they'll be asking him for money for their midterm reelections, and that the Republicans in the House were ended up unifying around this, so they kind of have to defend it. But do you think that criticism is at least something that makes the handful of remaining fiscal hawks that are on Capitol Hill, does it make them feel tingly?
I don't think so. Listen, can I just give an observation here? When Elon Musk came in and just tore into our massively bloated bureaucracy and started finding everything under the sun, including transgender, operas in developing countries and the like, and cutting all this stuff, the buzzsaw, the chainsaw, it was fantastic. Washington's never had anybody brazen enough to do it. Then I see Elon Musk leave and immediately call Trump's big, beautiful bill a disgusting abomination. And I thought, whoa, bro, that's not how Washington works.
No,
he's going to learn, I think, quickly that in this town, sometimes a switchblade is much better than a wrecking ball or a chainsaw.
There was a tweet from John Ekdahl that I saw. Elon Musk really did speed run through the Republican Party experience. 1, euphoric victory. 2, grand sweeping plans. 3, complete governing incompetence. 4, political disillusionment.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. He said it much better than I could. But, you're in this town. And so, I think to the point that, anyone takes some tingly comfort, I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure it exists. And it would have been maybe more effective for him to have narrowed that vitriol specifically tailored to the EV portion. Because he would have a right as someone with a lot of skin in that game to target it. And he might have affected a little stronger support, but instead he just took a sledgehammer to the whole damn thing. And I don't think that's
sandblast of Saltine. The thing that I do want to talk to you about a couple of other things. First off, I know that you were covering the situation in Boulder, as you said, this weekend. Give us some perspective on what's gone on out there. And also, to the degree that you are aware of it, how much attention did you pay to the fact that The rest of the media seem to be treating this in a really odd way. I don't know if you saw any of the headlines, for instance, from CBS and from others that kind of seem to downplay the idea that this guy's motivation was clear, or to suggest that it was some kind of, event. In other words, it was like, oh, just a bad thing happened, as opposed to describing what was clearly going on.
Absolutely. In a nutshell, just quickly for our viewers, over the weekend, I was doing this big weekend show that Ben and I have done regularly from time to time. And the story broke just an hour or so before we went on the air. And so then we covered it the entire time. And I remember in that press conference, you did have, the FBI director, a handful of Democrat leaders, including Colorado's Governor Jared Polis, all calling it a heinous act of terror. The word terror. Then the Boulder police chief didn't want to jump to conclusions, and I understand why, because he's the guy right at the tip of the spear, so he wants to make sure he's got that. Then it sort of came out. Well, after that show, I was anchoring Fox's special cut-in coverage on Sunday night at like 9 p.m. because there was another press conference. And it was at that moment, our colleague, Bill Malusian, was blowing my phone up saying, we got it confirmed he's in the country illegally. And so I broke that on Sunday night and then thought, man, this is, unbelievable stuff. He shouldn't have been here. The guy shouldn't have been here. And I woke up the next day, came back to DC, woke up the next day. I was looking, I'm like, where's that? That was a big deal. I only see it where we did it. No one, eventually the other legacy media caught up, but it's like they didn't want to touch it. Yeah. And it's because it's inconvenient. Yeah. And then now we know that not only had he overstayed a visa, but while his visa had expired, the asylum he had been applying for was given to him in the form of a 2-year work authorization that as well had expired. And in the one part of the story that I think needs a little bit of attention today, as we're learning more and more, and of course the wife and 5 kids of this heinous terrorist attack have been arrested and are facing expedited removal deportation. The one part of the story that's not getting enough attention is I want to know the identity of the gun store owner who really saved countless lives because he saw the illegal status, saw the non-legal status background check and denied the purchase of a handgun is what he wanted to buy. And while this flamethrower and Molotov cocktail thing is horrific, a handgun would have been much worse.
No, it would have been significantly worse. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, just because, and it's connected to this, we've seen in recent weeks the dramatic shift in coverage of Senator John Fetterman. The number of Democrats and former staffers who've come out in clearly a pretty orchestrated campaign, from my perspective, to go after him. And we saw, in fact, this past week, a number of different Philly sort of folks coming forward and saying that like he's not doing his job or he's not capable of doing it. They really have been going after him after he started talking about anti-Semitism, after he started talking about his opposition to Hamas. Here's what he had to say about this on Fox News Sunday, Cut 9.
It's very clear it's just part of like this weird smear, this thing. And the more kinds of left kind of media continues to have these kinds of an attack, and it's just part of a smear, and that's just not it's just not accurate. I've always been there. And for me, if I miss some of those votes, I've made 90% of them. And we all know those votes that I've missed were on Monday. Those are travel days. And I have 3 young kids, and those are throwaway procedural votes that they were never determined if they were important. That's a choice that I made. Of course, the
thing that I want to bring up to you here is, within Washington, we see this and we understand exactly what's going on here.
Right.
Do you think that people outside of this swamp understand what is going on here? Or is that something that is a story that is, not actually being told to the degree that people need to be aware of why suddenly Democrats are reversing completely on their attitude toward Fetterman?
I think the American people get it. Mm-hmm. I think they do. And I think, too, that, for a guy that, really struggled in communication after the stroke, when he had to really have the special equipment to process what people were asking him, he stayed in that fight. And I think the thing that the American people see, which are frustrating these operatives that are trying to take him down any way they can, is that he's actually authentic. Ben, about 2 months ago, in the early part of the year, I was just filling in as the White House reporter, and I had the early shift or so, and I was just going in, and I was getting a cup of coffee. There's a little coffee shop right across on Pennsylvania Avenue from the White House. And I was like, I'm going to jump in and get a quick cup of coffee, grab a cup of coffee, walking back to go to the White House. And Fetterman's just sitting there by himself in shorts, in a hoodie, pretty cold. I think it was like February back when this happened. And he was starting to early days of taking heat for his pro-Israel stance. And I asked him about it. I'm like, hey, they're coming after you. Seems like everybody's coming after you. He's like, yeah, whatever. He literally he's like, whatever, bro. And he was as authentic in that sort of casual moment. I didn't even know if he knew who I was, even though I've interviewed him once or twice. But it was very authentic. And I think that, people aren't going to be swayed by the narrative that some are trying to create about him when he is quite accessible and not afraid to talk to anybody about it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like their response to the Biden kind of collapse of that narrative and story is for them to try to say, oh, well, maybe we should Biden Fetterman. And I feel like that's what they're trying to do. Griff Jenkins, thank you so much for your premiere on the Big Ben Show.
It was awesome. I look forward to coming back, particularly when football season starts. It's not that far away.
Not that far away.
Training camp will be soon.
Thank you, Griff Jenkins. Time for the grab bag, joined by Dylan and Christine as always. And Dylan, I know that you were fantastically happy just the other day when this happened. Cut 12.
It's been a quarter of a century since Indiana has gone to the finals. But for the first time in 25 years, they are going to the NBA Finals.
So your Pacers are going to play tomorrow?
They are.
How do you feel about this?
Not good.
Not good?
If I'm being honest. I watched the ESPN picks, and not a single person picked the Pacers.
Oh, but see, when that happens, if it's universal, I actually feel better than if there's like one person who's like, I tend to zig where they zag.
That's true, but they did that to us against the Cavs too, and they did that to us again against the Knicks, and we won 4-2 in both series.
Okay,
so.
well, I'll be texting with you, and I will be consoling you if things don't go as well as you would like.
Yeah.
I know, Christine, that you have strong opinions about this Pacers series. How do you think that they're going to perform?
I mean, I have strong opinions about all sports, Ben. Don't just, pigeonhole me into the basketball. I mean, all I'm going to say is I'm usually an underdog because I am a Jets fan, so you never know.
Well, then
chin
you can
up,
be,
Dylan.
You can be
never
rooting
know.
along with Dylan then.
Chin up.
So there was an interesting comment. We always have these situations where smart people say stupid things. I think James Carville is usually a smart person, but this week he tweeted out, "The state of the world is crazy, so here's an idea. If the DNC wants to raise money immediately, put on sale sweatshirt with upside down USA flag, universal sign meaning in distress. Below that, 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. They will sell." So apparently James Carville doesn't care about the whole situation regarding Sam Alito's wife, if you recall that. No, it's totally fine now to do an upside down USA flag. How do you feel about this fashion statement, Christine?
I mean, I would like to see. Let's put for 1 month a MAGA hat and this sweatshirt up at the same time and see what sells out.
Yeah, no, I think my reaction to this is cut 13.
You said it, Pally. That's why I brought in the big guns. Say how-do to the raging Cajun, Mr. James Carville.
Oh, jeez. Did somebody open the Ark of the Covenant?
Now, see, Peter, what you got to do is you got to declare war. War, you see, war. Your only chance of surviving this scandal is to claim that Lola escaped.
So the thing about Carville is I can't look at him and take him seriously. news that was obviously rocketing around in the cultural space this past week was the conclusion of the Taylor Swift drama related to the control of her music, buying back the first 6 albums. Christine, I know that this was an important development in your household. What is the take there about what played out with Taylor?
Yeah, this was big in my household. Megan came to us to tell us the news, and Megan is only 12 years old, and she knew all about this. So obviously, Scooter Braun is an evil person. We all know that in my home, and we are very, very excited that Tay-Tay has her music back. I mean, listen. And I think you just said, like, the drama's over. I don't think there's ever a day where the drama and Taylor Swift don't happen. There's always going to be something.
Yeah.
But I love her, and I'm happy, and we can all just breathe a sigh of relief.
Well, I hate to burst the bubble here,
no,
but
don't,
I would just point out.
I'm telling you right now.
I would just point out.
Do not go
I
after
think this
her.
whole thing. I think this whole thing was a con. I think that this whole thing was a look. The reason I think that is because everybody benefited. Okay.
Yeah.
Other than the backlash and some angry emails that Scooter Braun got, and then that the media group that purchased it from him got, everyone got more money out of this situation. She got to do the re-records that have never been a thing in the industry that got a ton of success. Now she has the whole catalog back, and I'm sure there's and obviously she leveraged this into being a victim, which is hard to do when you are when you are as successful as she is.
Nope.
And so my view is, and I know Matt Maloney over at Pug agrees with me on this. Everyone benefited here. They all got more money.
I agree with you. I think, and I know my wife. I know my wife doesn't agree with me on that take.
Okay.
But I mean, she bought back. She's got her rights back.
Yeah.
But how many tens of millions of dollars
Good for her.
did she make doing the Taylor's versions that she would not have made
But she didn't,
if that didn't happen?
I guarantee you she didn't want to do that. She had to do that. She had no choice at that point but to do it. You guys are making a big mistake.
She created a whole new genre of this of re-recording and making so much money from it.
Because she had to.
Okay,
She's a very smart businesswoman. I think you guys are making a very big mistake.
Who benefits? Always ask who benefits.
You say one bad thing about
too cynical.
Taylor Swift, and you're on the wrong side.
No, she's brilliant. That's
do
what
you
I would
like
say
her
about
music,
that.
Ben? Honestly, be honest.
I do enjoy a good bit of her music.
What's your favorite Taylor Swift song?
Well, I got to be honest. I blank space.
Such a good one. Wow, that was impressive. I thought you were like, I don't know the names of them.
Are you kidding? No.
No.
I like that. That one just is an earworm for me. I don't know. Yeah. So, you sent along this story from the New York Post about these Uber Eats drivers.
Yes.
Now, I'll say something, which is that I really don't use Uber Eats. I order groceries like I do Instacart and things like that, and sometimes I'll use Uber Eats to order like a grocery or something quick that is needed for kids or something like that. But I don't personally use it. This is one of the reasons why, because it says yes, we eat your fries, and that's not all that happens. What was your reaction to reading this, Christine?
Okay, so I could see both sides because, like, you obviously know you pull up to that drive-thru. And those fries are in that bag, and you're trying to hold it. You're trying to close that bag and be like, I will not open this bag until I get home. And then your hand starts to go into the bag, and you're eating them. But the problem is,
it's not yours.
It's not yours to eat, and I worry.
Also, how many other things has that hand touched?
Oh, it grosses me out so much. It's so disgusting.
Oh, gosh. So, yeah, we're not huge Uber Eats people. I'm just gonna say it. I'm sorry, Bobby, but he's super cheap, and he would never spend the money on getting delivery. Like, he would just go get it himself. Never. We hardly ever get anything delivered to us.
I have no idea how often we get an Uber Eats delivery.
Have you ever had booze delivered to you? Have you ever had booze
Sorry?
delivered? Have you ever had booze?
I've had that. So that you can't. There's limits on that in terms of Virginia.
It's weird in Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you can. But I have had beer delivered because I forgot to get it for a party.
It can be, I think the Virginia law is like beer or wine.
Yes.
No hard liquor allowed at all.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. They relaxed it a little bit during the pandemic, but that was it. Crazy. So I assume that you have, Christine.
I mean, I plead the fifth.
Yes. So one last
Vodka.
thing. I had the experience that was similar to your own, Christine, this past weekend when we had back-to-back rehearsal and then recital for our 4-year-old daughter. I handled solo the rehearsal part of it, and wife and mom handled the recital part of it, which is more fun because you can take flowers and stuff. Here's the thing. It took almost 3 hours. And when you show up, the very first thing that one of the volunteers who knows me from her school says to me is, "Did you hear the great news? Her group is 20th out of 22." So that meant I had to sit through. And here's what I actually learned. I don't know what they teach at these dancing schools, but I think it is really a disservice to the consumer to describe it as dance. I mean,
I know.
They're very cute, but the thing is, like, you could buy that outfit and just take pictures of her in it, and it would be just as if, like, just let her dance by herself. She doesn't need to. I mean, it's.
But did she love it? Was she so happy? Is she a performer?
She is a performer. In fact, when she walked off during the rehearsal, she was the only one of her group of 10 girls to be waving to the audience.
That's why you guys must have been so proud.
That's an indication. So you've been listening to The Big Ben Show. I'm Ben Domenech. Happy to be joined by Dylan, Christine. My thanks to Griff. My thanks to Jennifer Sey. We will be back next week with more to dive back into the fray.